The first time Clara heard the cat meow was the exact moment her own voice finally broke. 3 days after burying her mother in the echoing cavern of her childhood home, the silence had become a physical thing. It pressed down on her chest, thick as the dust motes dancing in the weak November sunlight filtering through the lace curtains her mother had starched religiously. Outside, a persistent, icy rain tapped against the windows of the old Victorian, a sound that usually soothed Clara, now felt like fingernails scraping glass. She'd been standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at the faded floral wallpaper peeling near the ceiling, a pattern she'd known since infancy. Her hand rested on the cold enamel of the stove, the same stove where her mother, Evelyn, had burned countless batches of cookies, humming off-key show tunes. The emptiness was absolute. A void where warmth and bustling life and gentle nagging had once resided. She'd held it together through the arrangements, the service, the awkward condolences from distant relatives who smelled vaguely of mothballs and regret. She'd held it together while sorting through drawers filled with neatly folded handkerchiefs and decades-old grocery lists, her mother's precise cursive a heartbreakingly familiar anchor. But standing there, in the silent kitchen, the ghost scent of Earl Grey tea and vanilla extract hanging faintly in the air, the dam crumbled. A sob, ragged and entirely involuntary, tore itself from her throat. It was a sound of pure, undiluted loss, shocking in its rawness even to her own ears. Her shoulders shook, tears, hot and sudden, blurred the peeling wallpaper into a watercolor smear. She pressed the heels of her hands hard against her eyes, trying to push the grief back in, to rebuild the wall. That's when she heard it. A soft, questioning sound. Not a purr. Not a hiss. A single clipped meow. It came from the doorway leading to the dim, cluttered dining room. Claire froze, breath catching in her wet throat. She lowered her hands, blinking away tears. Peering into the gloom, she saw nothing at first. Just the familiar shapes of the heavy mahogany table, the sideboard laden with tarnished silver, the high-backed chairs like silent sentinels. Then, movement. Low to the ground, near the leg of the farthest chair. A cat. Thin. The color of storm clouds and chimney soot. It sat perfectly still, watching her. Its eyes, one a startling luminous green, the other a deep, bottomless amber, held an unnerving intensity. They didn't blink. They simply observed, taking in her tear-streaked face, her hunched posture, the tremor she couldn't quite suppress. Clara hadn't seen a cat around the property in years. Her mother, while fond of birds at the feeder, hadn't been a pet person. This creature looked feral. Its fur, though dark, was matted in places, dull. One ear bore a ragged notch, a badge from some long-forgotten skirmish. It held itself with a stillness that felt ancient, watchful, utterly alien to the domestic chaos Clara associated with cats. She sniffled, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her worn flannel shirt, another relic pulled from an old drawer. The sound seemed to break the spell. The cat, without making another sound, simply turned, a fluid shadow melting back into the deeper darkness of the dining room, vanishing as silently as it had appeared. Clara stood there, utterly bewildered. Had she imagined it? A grief-induced hallucination? The house was old, full of creaks and sighs. But that meow, it had been so distinct, so present. And those mismatched eyes, they felt seared onto her retinas. She didn't see the cat again that day, or the next. The oppressive silence of the house, now filled with the monumental task of sorting through a lifetime, settled back over her. Boxes began to accumulate in corners, labeled charity, shred, keep. Every object was a landmine. Her mother's favorite teacup chipped. A bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. A pair of gardening gloves, still faintly smelling of earth and her mother's hand cream. Grief wasn't a linear path, it was a labyrinth Clara navigated blindly, stumbling from moments of numb detachment to sharp, unexpected stabs of pain that left her breathless. It happened again a week later. She was in the seldom-used formal living room, a room perpetually shrouded in drop cloths even when Clara was a child. For best. Now, she'd pulled the sheets off the furniture, releasing decades of trapped dust that glittered in the weak afternoon light. She found a box of old photographs, black and white, sepia-toned, people stiffly posed in unfamiliar clothes. Faces she didn't recognize. Her mother, young, startlingly beautiful, standing beside a man Clara had never seen. Not her father. A stranger with intense eyes and a confident smile, his hand possessively on Evelyn's shoulder. Who was he? Why had her mother never mentioned him? The questions, sharp and sudden, collided with the ever-present grief. A fresh wave of tears welled, hot and insistent. She sank onto the dusty velvet sofa, the photograph slipping from her fingers, a sob escaping her lips as she buried her face in her hands. And there it was again. That same soft, questioning meow. Clara jerked her head up. Then, in the arched doorway leading to the hall, sat the cat. Same storm cloud fur, same unnerving mismatched gaze fixed unwaveringly on her tear-streaked face. It hadn't moved closer. It simply sat, statue still, observing her distress. "What?" Claire whispered, her voice thick and shaky. "What do you want?" The cat offered no answer. It didn't blink, just watched. As Clara's sobs subsided into shaky breaths, the cat, silently, turned and disappeared back into the gloom of the hallway. A pattern emerged. Over the next fortnight, Clara only ever saw the cat, or more accurately, heard its single, soft meow when she was crying. Never when she was sorting boxes with grim determination. Never when she was making a solitary sandwich in the kitchen. Never when she sat staring blankly out at the rain-lashed garden. Only when the grief, or the confusion, or the sheer, overwhelming loneliness cracked through her fragile composure, and the tears fell. The cat became a silent, spectral presence in the decaying grandeur of the house. Clara started leaving a small saucer of milk just inside the back door, near the overgrown herb garden her mother had once tended with such pride. The milk would be gone by morning, but she never saw the cat drink it. She began leaving scraps of chicken, tuna, carefully placed on a chipped saucer on the back porch step. These too vanished, leaving only faint paw prints in the damp earth come dawn. She started calling her, tentatively, Little Shadow. It felt fitting. The cat was like a shadow, present only in specific, emotionally charged moments, then dissolving back into the fabric of the old house. Claire tried to approach her once. She'd been crying, slumped at the bottom of the grand, curving staircase, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the emptiness above her. The soft meow came from the dimness under the stairs. Claire whispered, "Little one, it's okay." She slowly reached out a hand. The cat, those extraordinary eyes wide, didn't flee immediately. It watched the approaching hand with intense focus, its body taut. For a heartbeat, Clara thought she might actually touch the soft, ragged fur. Then, a subtle flinch, a low, almost inaudible growl vibrated in the cat's throat, and she was gone, a streak of gray vanishing into the deeper darkness beneath the staircase. Clara pulled her hand back, feeling foolish, yet strangely touched by the brief proximity. One bitterly cold afternoon, Clara was in her mother's bedroom, the epicenter of her grief. She'd finally mustered the courage to open the wardrobe. The scent that wafted out, a complex blend of lavender sachets, faint traces of her mother's favorite rose perfume, and the unique, comforting scent of her, was a physical blow. Clara pulled out a worn cardigan, the soft cable knit wool her mother always wore in the evenings. She held it to her face, inhaling deeply, and the dam burst. Great, heaving sobs racked her body. She sank to the floor, clutching the cardigan like a lifeline, lost in a sea of raw, inconsolable pain. The meow came softer this time, almost hesitant. It wasn't from the doorway. Clara, through her tears, saw the cat had actually entered the room. It sat just inside the threshold, its usual watchful stillness replaced by something else. Its ears were flattened slightly, not in aggression, but perhaps concern? Its tail twitched a single, agitated flick. The mismatched eyes, usually so distant and observing, seemed softer, brighter with an unreadable emotion. It took 1, 2, tentative steps towards her, across the faded Persian rug. It stopped a few feet away, its gaze never leaving Clara's crumpled form. Clara hiccuped, trying to stifle her sobs, mesmerized by the cat's unexpected advance. The cat watched her, its small chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, slowly, deliberately, it lowered itself. Not into a relaxed crouch, but into a careful, deliberate loaf position, its paws tucked neatly beneath it. Right there, on the rug, within Clara's tear-blurred line of sight. It didn't purr. It didn't rub against anything. It simply sat, present, its intense gaze holding hers. A silent vigil. Clara's sobs gradually subsided, replaced by shaky breaths and the occasional sniffle. She wiped her face with the sleeve of the cardigan she still clutched. The cat remained motionless, watching. The room was silent except for Clara's ragged breathing and the faint ticking of the old carriage clock on the dresser. The winter light was fading, casting long, melancholy shadows across the room. The scent of her mother, the feel of the worn wool, the silent, watchful presence of the strange little cat, it all coalesced into a moment of profound, aching stillness. Clara stared at the cat, really looked at her, for the first time. Beyond the matted fur and the ragged ear, beyond the unnerving eyes. She saw the delicate bone structure beneath the thin frame, the surprising grace in the way she held herself even while sitting still. She saw vulnerability, and something else, a fierce, quiet attentiveness that felt protective. "Why?" Clara whispered, her voice raw and small in the quiet room. "Why do you only speak when I break?" The cat, of course, offered no answer, but it didn't look away. It just stayed, sitting sentinel on the rug, its mismatched eyes reflecting the dying light, a small, silent anchor in Clara's sea of grief. The dust motes continued their slow dance in the fading beam of light from the window. The clock ticked. The house sighed. And in that quiet, tear-salted space, something shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but deep within Clara, a tiny, almost imperceptible fissure appeared in the wall of her isolation. The grief hadn't lessened, the tasks hadn't vanished, but the crushing loneliness, for this one fragile moment, felt shared, watched over, acknowledged by this small, enigmatic creature who only broke her silence to bear witness to Clara's deepest pain. The journey hadn't begun with a bang or a dramatic rescue. It began with a single, soft meow in the echoing silence of loss. And as Clara sat on the floor of her mother's room, the scent of lavender and roses clinging to the wool in her hands, staring into the unblinking gaze of the little shadow cat, she felt the first faint stirrings of a connection, fragile as a spider's web, yet strangely, unexpectedly real. The mystery of the cat, why she was here, why she behaved this way, was a tiny spark of curiosity in the vast darkness of her grief. A spark she hadn't known she needed, or could even feel again. Something important had quietly begun. The days after the vigil in her mother's bedroom settled into a new, fragile rhythm for Clara. The grief, a heavy, constant companion, didn't vanish. It shifted, sometimes a dull ache behind her ribs, sometimes a sharp, unexpected pang triggered by the scent of Earl Grey, or the sight of her mother's favorite gardening trowel lying forgotten on the back porch. But the crushing sense of utter isolation that had eased just a fraction, because she wasn't entirely alone in the echoing old house anymore. There was the shadow. Clara began to actively look for her, not intrusively, but with a quiet awareness. She kept the small chipped saucer on the back porch step meticulously replenished, waterly fresh every morning. Food, scraps of chicken from her own meals, a can of tuna opened specifically for the small feline ghost. She'd place it down, step back inside, and watch through the slightly steamed kitchen window. The shadow was a creature of twilight and secrecy. Clara rarely saw her approach. One moment the step would be empty, the gray November light leaching color from the overgrown garden. The next, a small, dark shape would materialize, low to the ground, ears swiveling like radar dishes. She'd eat with a feral intensity, head down, body tense, glancing up constantly, poised to vanish at the slightest sound or movement from within the house. She always came. The food was always gone. Inside the house, the pattern held. The shadow only vocalized that single, soft, questioning meow when Clara's tears fell. It happened in the attic, amidst boxes of forgotten Christmas decorations, when Clara found the hand-knitted stocking with her own childhood name lovingly stitched, her mother's careful work. A choked sob escaped, and instantly, a soft meow echoed from the shadowed corner near the dormer window. Clara turned, blinking through tears, to see the cat sitting perfectly still, watching her, those mismatched eyes reflecting the weak light filtering through the grimy glass. When Clara's tears subsided, sniffing and wiping her face, the shadow simply melted back into the gloom, a wisp of smoke. It happened again in the cluttered study, surrounded by towers of her mother's meticulously organized gardening journals. Clara traced a finger over a pressed flower, a delicate bluebell, labeled in her mother's precise hand, Clara's favorite spot, May 98. The memory, vivid and bright, of sitting in a carpet of bluebells, her mother pointing out birds, hit her like a physical blow. A tear splashed onto the brittle page. From beneath the heavy oak desk, the sound was muffled, but distinct. Clara peered under, catching only the gleam of those extraordinary eyes in the darkness, before they vanished. The shadow never approached during these moments of shared sorrow. Not again, not like that day in the bedroom. She remained a silent witness, a small, still presence acknowledging Clara's pain from a respectful distance. But her presence, the sheer consistency of it, began to weave a thread of connection Clara hadn't expected. It wasn't the boisterous affection of a pet dog or the demanding rub of a confident house cat. It was something quieter, deeper. A recognition, a silent pact. I see you hurting. I'm here. Clara started talking to her, hesitantly, mostly when she was alone, but sometimes, when she sensed the shadow's presence in a doorway or under a chair, she'd speak aloud. Cold out there today, shadow, proper November nip. Found another box of photo albums. Feels like digging up ghosts. She didn't expect an answer, and she never got one, beyond the occasional flick of a dark ear in her direction. But the act of speaking, of addressing another living being within those walls, however elusive, chipped away at the suffocating silence. It made the grief feel less monstrous. Shareable, even if only with a creature who understood silence better than words. One afternoon, a rare shaft of weak winter sun pierced the clouds, illuminating the dust motes in the rarely used front parlor. Clara was attempting to sort through a box of her father's old things. Things her mother had kept but clearly never revisited. Tools, mostly rusted and smelling faintly of oil and neglect. Her father had died when she was very young, a vague memory of quiet sadness, a man mostly existing in faded photographs. Sorting his things felt impersonal, disconnected, unlike the visceral pain of her mother's belongings. She wasn't crying, just methodically wiping grime from an old spirit level. A movement caught her eye. Near the heavy velvet drapes, half concealed, sat the shadow. She wasn't watching Clara, not directly. Her mismatched gaze was fixed, intensely, on a patch of sunlight warming a worn spot on the Persian rug. Her body was utterly still, but Clara could see the subtle tension, the focus. Then slowly, deliberately, the shadow rose. She stretched, a long, luxurious arch of her thin back claws extending briefly, scraping faintly on the wooden floor beneath the rug's edge. The sound was startlingly loud in the quiet room. Then, with infinite care, she stepped into the exact center of the sunbeam. She turned once, with a slow, deliberate pirouette, before settling down into a perfect, compact loaf, her chin resting on her paws, her eyes closing to slits. A deep, rumbling purr began. So low Clara felt it more than heard it, a vibration that seemed to resonate in the still air. Clara froze, the rag still in her hand, the spirit level forgotten. She watched, mesmerized. This was new. The shadow basking, vulnerable, yet utterly at peace in this small patch of stolen warmth. The sight, so simple, so purely cat, pierced Clara unexpectedly. It wasn't grief this time, but a sudden, sharp pang of tenderness. This wary, scarred, silent creature, finding a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy in a sunbeam. It felt profound. A tiny rebellion against the gray November world, against the dust, against the grief that filled the house. Clara found herself smiling, a real smile, the first one that hadn't felt like a grimace in weeks. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched the shadows soak up the warmth, the purr a soft counterpoint to the ticking of the mantel clock. Later that evening, Clara sat at the cluttered kitchen table, the mysterious photograph spread out before her under the harsh glare of the overhead light. Her mother, radiant, her smile wide and unguarded, utterly unlike the careful, reserved woman Clara had known. And the man, his arm around her mother's waist, his own smile confident, possessive, his eyes, intense, dark, familiar in a way Clara couldn't place. Who was he? A forgotten uncle? A lover before her father? Why was this picture hidden away, while others were displayed? The questions gnawed at her, a different kind of ache, a puzzle wrapped in her grief. She traced the edge of the photograph, the gloss cool under her fingertip. A single tear, born of confusion and a strange sense of betrayal, escaped and tracked down her cheek. It came from much closer than usual. Clara looked up, startled. The shadow was there, not in the doorway, but just inside the kitchen, near the leg of the old dresser. She wasn't looking at Clara, not directly. Her head was tilted, her mismatched gaze fixed, intensely, on the photograph lying on the table. Her body was rigid, tail held stiffly low. She took one, tentative steps closer, her nose twitching slightly, as if trying to catch a scent from the picture. Then, she looked up, directly at Clara. Not with the usual distant observation, but with a look Clara couldn't decipher. It wasn't fear or curiosity, it felt deeper. Knowing. There was a stillness in those extraordinary eyes that held Clara frozen. The shadow held her gaze for a long moment. The purr from the sunbeam utterly vanished, replaced by an electric tension in the small body. Then, without a sound, she turned and slipped back into the shadowed hallway, leaving Clara alone with the photograph, the tear drying on her cheek, and a new, unsettling layer added to the mystery. The incident with the photograph lingered. Clara found herself watching the shadow more closely, not just for her presence, but for reactions. Did she seem drawn to certain rooms? Certain objects? The shadow's behavior, however, remained consistent. She appeared silently during tears, observed, sometimes basked in sunbeams, and vanished like smoke. Her trust in Clara's offerings grew, incrementally. Clara began to see her eat from the porch saucer while she herself sat quietly just inside the open back door, wrapped in a thick shawl against the cold. The shadow would glance up frequently, warily, but continued eating, her body less rigid, her retreat less instantaneous if Clara made a small, slow movement. One particularly bleak afternoon, the sky a uniform sheet of lead, Clara succumbed. The weight of the house, the unfinished tasks, the gnawing loneliness, and the persistent, unanswered questions about the photograph pressed down until she couldn't breathe. She didn't make it to a chair. She simply slid down the wall in the dim hallway near the foot of the stairs and wept. Great, shuddering sobs that felt ripped from her core. The grief wasn't just for her mother now, it was for the life she'd left behind in the city, the future that felt blank and terrifying, the feeling of being utterly, irrevocably adrift. The meow came, soft, almost lost in her own crying. Clara barely registered it at first, but then she felt it. A presence. Close. She lifted her head, her vision blurred, her face wet and swollen. The shadow wasn't sitting a few feet away. She was right there, less than an arm's length from Clara's bent knees. She hadn't settled into her usual watchful loaf. She was standing, her small body tense, her tail twitching, her mismatched eyes fixed on Clara's face with an intensity that felt urgent. Her mouth opened slightly, not in a hiss, but as if she wanted to make another sound, but couldn't. She took one hesitant step closer, then another, her gaze never wavering from Clara's tears. She stopped, so close Clara could see the individual strands of her ruffled gray fur, the intricate pattern of black and silver, the slight tremor in her thin legs. She leaned forward, just a fraction, her nose twitching again, as if trying to understand the scent of this profound human sorrow. Clara held her breath, utterly still, mesmerized by this unprecedented proximity, by the raw concern radiating from the small creature. The shadow held her gaze, that unblinking stare holding worlds of unspoken feeling. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted a single, delicate front paw. Not to bat or scratch. She extended it, hesitant, trembling slightly, and placed it, feather-light, on the worn fabric of Clara's jeans, just above her knee. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't affection as Clara knew it. It was a touch. A connection. The silent, powerful, "I am here." The touch, so tentative, so unexpected, broke something loose inside Clara. A fresh wave of tears came, but different this time. Less ragged despair, more a release of pent-up tension, a flood of pure, overwhelmed emotion. She didn't reach out. She didn't move. She just sat there, crying, feeling the slight, warm pressure of that small paw on her leg, anchoring her, holding her steady against the tidal wave of her grief. The shadow didn't move her paw. She didn't purr. She simply stood, maintaining that gentle contact, her extraordinary eyes fixed on Clara, unwavering, bearing witness, offering a silent, profound comfort that resonated deeper than any words ever could. The cold hallway, the dusty grandeur, the echoing emptiness of the house, all faded into the background. There was only this, the raw sound of Clara's tears, the faint, rapid breathing of the small cat, and the incredible grounding weight of that single fragile paw resting on her knee. A bridge built not on words or history, but on shared silence and the simple, extraordinary act of being present in the heart of another's pain. The trust. Clara realized her breath hitching was no longer flowing just one way. The fragile bridge built by a single paw on a knee didn't vanish, but the landscape around Clara and the shadow shifted subtly, irrevocably. Winter deepened its grip, locking the old Victorian in a shroud of gray ice and biting wind that howled like a lost thing in the eaves. The house felt less like a mausoleum now, and more like a fragile ship adrift, with Clara and her silent feline companion its only crew. Shadow's presence became not exactly predictable, but integrated. She still only meowed during tears, a soft, unwavering echo to Clara's sorrow. But the distance between them had lessened. She no longer vanished instantly when Clara's crying stopped. Sometimes, she'd linger in the doorway, watching Clara wipe her face, her mismatched gaze holding a quiet, almost contemplative stillness. Other times, she'd retreat under a nearby piece of furniture, a dark smudge beneath the sofa or an armchair, simply present. The tentative trust extended to the sunbeam ritual. On days when weak light pierced the gloom, Clara would often find the shadow already basking, purring softly, sometimes even stretching out fully, exposing her thin belly in a gesture of vulnerability that made Clara's heart clench. She'd move quietly, careful not to disturb the small creature's hard-won peace, a silent observer herself now. Clara continued talking to her about the relentless sorting, the memories attached to chipped teacups and moth-eaten shawls, the bewildering photograph of her mother and the unknown man, which she'd propped tentatively on the mantelpiece, a constant, silent question mark. She talked about the practicalities, the leak in the conservatory roof, the ancient boiler's ominous groans, the sheer, overwhelming cost of maintaining the decaying behemoth her mother had left behind. "Think we should just let the ivy swallow the whole place, Shadow?" she'd murmur, watching the cat meticulously clean a paw after a sunbeam session. The shadow eye, of course, offered no financial advice, but the rhythmic rasp of her tongue was a comforting counterpoint to Clara's anxieties. The twist began, not with a dramatic event, but with a small, persistent wrongness. It started in the library. A room Clara had largely avoided, dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with volumes her mother had inherited but likely never read, smelling of dust and dry paper and something faintly mildewy. Clara was tackling a lower shelf, pulling out heavy, leather-bound tomes to dust, when she noticed the wallpaper behind the books. Unlike the faded florals elsewhere, this was a deep, rich burgundy, embossed with a subtle damask pattern. And near the baseboard, behind where a particularly imposing set of encyclopedias had stood, the paper was damaged. Not just peeling, but shredded. Long, vertical scratches, deep enough to gouge the plaster beneath, marred the elegant pattern. It looked deliberate, violent. Clara frowned, running her fingers over the rough grooves. "Mice?" she muttered aloud, though the marks seemed too large, too defined. She glanced around the dim room, half expecting to see the shadow watching her, but the space was empty. She dismissed it, chalking it up to decades of neglect and unseen rodents, and moved on. But the image lingered, unsettling. A few days later, sorting through linen in a musty upstairs closet, she found similar damage. The inside of the closet door, old, solid wood, bore deep, parallel scratches near the bottom, as if something had desperately tried to claw its way out, or in. The marks felt purposeful, aggressive. Then, one frigid night, Clara heard it. She'd been lying awake, staring at the shadowed ceiling of her childhood bedroom, listening to the wind rattle the loose sash window. The grief, a low tide tonight, was replaced by a gnawing anxiety about the house, the future, the photograph. Sleep felt miles away. That's when the sound cut through the wind's moan. A rhythmic, persistent scratch, scratch, scratch. Not the light skittering of mice. This was heavier, determined. It came from the hallway, right outside her door. Clara's breath hitched. She sat up slowly, heart pounding absurdly loud in the silence between scratches. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Fuzz. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded like claws on wood. Big claws. Fear, cold and sudden, prickled her skin. Was someone or something in the house? The old stories, the creaks and groans she dismissed, suddenly felt menacing. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling, ready to call, who? The police? To report scratching? Then a soft sound. A low, almost inaudible meow? It wasn't the shadow's usual clear meow. It was muffled, strained, coming from the same spot as the scratching. Clara froze, phone clutched in her hand, confusion warring with fear. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The scratching stopped instantly. Silence. Then a soft thump, like a small body settling onto the floorboards. Clara waited, straining her ears. Nothing. Just the wind. Slowly, cautiously, she slipped out of bed and crept to the door. She pressed her ear against the cold wood. Silence. Holding her breath, she turned the knob and opened the door, just a crack. The line pressed against the baseboard, right where the scratching had been, was the shadow. She looked up as the light from Clara's room spilled over her, her mismatched eyes wide, startled, almost guilty. Her body was tense, not relaxed. And Clara saw, on the dark wood of the baseboard, fresh, pale scratches, stark against the old varnish. "Shadow!" Clara breathed, crouching down. "Was that you?" The cat didn't move. She just stared, her gaze intense, unreadable. But the evidence was there. The scratches matched the ones in the library, the closet. It was her. Relief washed over Clara, instantly followed by bewilderment. But Shadow had never shown destructive behavior. She was fastidious, quiet, almost obsessively clean in her rituals. This frantic clawing, it felt completely out of character. "What are you doing, little one?" Clara murmured, reaching out slowly. The shadow flinched, just slightly, but didn't flee. She allowed Clara's fingers to gently brush the top of her head, a rare concession. Her fur felt warm, but her body vibrated with a tension Clara hadn't felt since their earliest encounters. She wasn't purring. She was agitated. The scratching became a nightly ritual. Always the same spot in the hallway, outside Clara's door. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Fuzz. Sometimes accompanied by that low, strained meow. Clara would open her door, find the shadow there, looking up with that same intense, almost haunted expression. She'd stop scratching when Clara appeared, sometimes slinking away, sometimes just sitting, staring at the wall, as if listening for something Clara couldn't hear. It started bleeding into the daylight hours too. Clara would find the shadow sitting, statue still, in the hallway, facing that same section of baseboard. Her focus was unnerving. She wasn't basking, she wasn't resting. She was, what? Waiting. Clara approached quietly and saw the cat's ears twitching, swiveling minutely, as if tuned into a frequency beyond human hearing. Her nose wrinkled slightly, testing the air near the scratched wood. Curiosity, laced with a growing unease, replaced Clara's initial bewilderment. What was behind that wall? Was it just the instinct of a feral cat? A remnant of some past trauma within the house? Or something else? The photograph of her mother and the intense-eyed man seemed to watch her from the mantelpiece, its secret feelings suddenly, ominously connected. Clara tried to investigate the spot herself. She ran her hands over the baseboard, pressed her ear against the wall. She heard nothing but the usual settling groans of the old house. The plaster felt solid, cold. There was no obvious gap, no hidden panel she could detect. Just wood oil plaster and layers of paint over shadows' persistent marks. The shadow's agitation grew. Her sunbeam sessions became less frequent, shorter. She ate with less relish, often leaving food untouched on the porch saucer. She started appearing at the hallway spot during the day, not scratching, but pawing at it, a soft, insistent tap-tap-tap with a single front paw. Her mismatched eyes, when they met Clara's, held a new intensity. Not just observation, but a silent, desperate, pleading. One bitterly cold afternoon, Clara reached her breaking point. The relentless scratching, the shadow's visible distress, the oppressive weight of the house's secrets, the gnawing anxiety about her own future, it all coalesced into a simmering frustration. She was kneeling in the hallway, trying once more to find a loose board, a crack, anything, her fingers numb with cold and futility. The shadow sat nearby, watching her, that low, unhappy tension radiating from her small frame. Clara pressed harder, uselessly, against the unyielding wood. "What?" Clara snapped, the word sharper than she intended, startling even herself. She turned to face the cat, her own frustration boiling over. "What is it? What do you want me to do?" Her voice cracked, echoing slightly in the high-ceiling space. "I don't understand." The shadow flinched at the outburst, her ears flattening. She didn't retreat. She stared at Clara, her green and amber eyes wide, almost shocked. Then, something shifted in her gaze. The pleading, the confusion, hardened into something else. A fierce, almost stubborn determination. She looked from Clara's frustrated face, back to the scratched baseboard. Then, she did something entirely new. She lowered her head, not in submission, but focus. She pressed her nose hard against the deepest gouge in the wood, sniffing deeply, urgently. Then, she started to dig. Not with claws this time. With her front paws, rapidly, frantically, scraping at the floorboards directly in front of the baseboard. Not scratching upwards, but digging downwards, as if trying to burrow under it. Dust and splinters flew. Her small body vibrated with effort, a low growl rumbling in her chest, utterly unlike her silent nature. Scrabble, scrabble, scrabble. It was a sound of pure, desperate instinct. Clara stared, frozen, her own frustration evaporating, replaced by a cold thrill of fear? Recognition? The shadow wasn't just scratching a wall. She was trying to get somewhere, trying to reach something. Something she desperately needed or knew was there. Something under the house? Behind the wall? The frantic digging stopped as suddenly as it began. The shadow lifted her head, panting slightly, her sides heaving. She looked at Clara, then deliberately, slowly, lowered her head again, pressing her ear flat against the floorboard she'd been digging at. She closed her eyes, concentrating, utterly still. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara held her breath, watching the small cat, her own heart pounding against her ribs. The wind moaned outside. The old house creaked. The shadow remained frozen, ear pressed to the wood, a small, dark statue of absolute focus. What was she listening for? What did she know? After an eternity, the shadow opened her eyes. She looked up at Clara, not with fear, not with pleading, but with a profound, unsettling certainty. She held Clara's gaze for a long, heavy moment. Then, without a sound, she turned, walked a few steps down the hallway, and sat down, facing the scratched baseboard once more. Her posture wasn't tense now. It was resolute, waiting, as if she'd delivered a message, and now expected Clara to understand and act. Clara looked from the cat's unwavering gaze to the frantic claw marks on the wall, to the fresh scrapes on the floorboard where Shadow had tried to dig. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken urgency. The mystery was no longer just about a silent cat and a grieving woman. It was about the house itself, its bones, its secrets, buried not just in memories and photographs, but possibly, literally, within its walls, or beneath its floors. The comfortable rhythm of shared grief and quiet companionship had shattered. The shadow wasn't just a witness to Clara's pain anymore. She was a guide, pointing insistently, desperately, towards a hidden truth Clara wasn't sure she was ready to face. The question hanging in the icy air wasn't just, why does she scratch? It was, what is she trying to show me? And what will I find when I look? The safe, contained world of sorting boxes and shared silences was over. The journey into the heart of the house's darkness, and perhaps her mother's hidden past, had truly begun. The scratching wasn't random destruction. It was a code, a demand. And Clara, standing in the cold hallway, dust on her knees, staring into the shadow's ancient, knowing eyes, knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. The silence in the hallway after Shadow's digging demonstration was a physical weight. It pressed down on Clara, thick and cold as the February frost creeping up the window panes. The frantic scrape of claws on wood, the small cats panting, the intense, demanding stare, it all hung suspended in the air, vibrating with an urgency that made Clara's skin prickle. Shadow hadn't just scratched a wall. She'd tunneled into Clara's fragile sense of control, exposing the raw nerves beneath. For days, the hallway became a battlefield. Clara's resolve warred with fear. Fear of what she might find. Fear of disturbing something best left buried. Fear of confirming suspicions about her mother's past that felt like a betrayal. But Shadow's silent vigil was relentless. She stationed herself near the scratched baseboard, her gaze following Clara's every move, a constant, wordless accusation. The scratching resumed at night, more desperate, more frantic. Scratch, scratch, scrape. Clara would lie rigid in bed, listening, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sometimes, she'd open the door to find Shadow mid-scrape, whipping her head around, eyes wide and wild in the dim light from Clara's room. The guilt was corrosive. This small creature, who had offered silent comfort in her deepest grief, was now radiating a distress Clara felt responsible for alleviating, but paralyzed to address. The breaking point came on a night when the wind screamed like a banshee around the eaves, rattling the loose windows in their frames. The storm outside mirrored the tempest inside Clara. She'd spent the day battling a frozen pipe in the cellar, the icy water soaking her sleeves, the frustration a simmering pot threatening to boil over. Then, sorting through a box of her mother's old sewing patterns, she'd found a tiny, hand-knit baby booty, impossibly small, tucked away beneath tissue paper. It wasn't hers. The realization, a sibling she never knew, a loss her mother never spoke of, hit with the force of a physical blow. She'd fled to the kitchen, leaning heavily on the cold enamel sink, tears of confusion and renewed grief blurring the view of the storm-lashed garden. No Meow came. Clara realized it with a jolt. She was crying, hard, shoulders shaking, and Shadow hadn't appeared. The absence was louder than any meow. It screamed abandonment, rejection. Had she finally driven the cat away with her inaction? The thought pierced her deeper than the grief itself. She pushed away from the sink, wiping her face roughly with her damp sleeve. The storm raged. The house groaned. Somewhere, Shadow was clawing at a wall, alone. Enough. The decision crystallized, cold and sharp. It wasn't about the photograph anymore. It wasn't about her mother's secrets. It was about the small, gray cat who had anchored her in the storm of her sorrow, who now needed her. Clara marched into the dim hallway, the beam of her phone flashlight cutting a shaky path through the gloom. Shadow was there, hunched near the baseboard, her body a tense coil of shadow. She looked up as the light hit her, her mismatched eyes reflecting the beam like chips of polished glass. There was no flinch this time, only a profound weariness and a flicker of hope. Clara didn't speak. She knelt, the cold of the floorboard seeping through her jeans. She ignored the scratches on the wall for a moment. Instead, she focused on the floorboard Shadow had tried to dig beneath. Running her fingers along its edge, she felt it. A slight give. A fraction of movement the others didn't have. Years of paint and grime had sealed it, but it wasn't nailed down as securely as its neighbors. Shadow, sensing the shift, crept closer, her nose twitching frantically near the seam where the floorboard met the baseboard. "Okay," Clara whispered, her voice raw. "Okay, little one. Show me." She needed tools. A flathead screwdriver from her father's rusted toolbox in the cellar. A hammer. The metal felt cold and alien in her hand. She wedged the screwdriver tip into the narrow gap between the suspect floorboard and its neighbor. Levered gently. The wood groaned in protest. Shadow pressed her body flat against the baseboard, her entire being focused on the spot. Clara used the hammer lightly on the screwdriver handle. The wood creaked louder. A small shower of dust and ancient paint chips fell. Shadow let out a soft, urgent ding. The sound was sharp, final. The edge of the floorboard splintered upwards. Clara dropped the tools, her breath catching. Using her fingers now, she pried at the loosened board. It resisted, warped by time and damp, then suddenly gave way with a protesting shriek of old nails. She lifted it, revealing a dark, gaping rectangle beneath, a shallow cavity between the floor joists, about the size of a shoebox. The smell that wafted up was ancient, dust, dry rot, and something else, faintly metallic, like old coins, and a ghost of cedar. Shadow let out a sound Clara had never heard before. A high, thin chirrup, almost a sob. She surged forward, pressing her face into the opening, sniffing desperately, her entire body trembling. Clara aimed her phone light into the hole. Dust motes danced in the beam. Nestled in the cavity, coated in a thick gray shroud of undisturbed dust, lay a small, rectangular object. Not a shoebox. Something harder. But Clara reached in, her fingers brushing against the gritty surface. It felt solid, smooth beneath the grime. She grasped it and lifted it out into the dim hallway light. It was a small, ornate wooden box. Dark, polished wood, perhaps rosewood, inlaid with a delicate geometric pattern in lighter wood around the edges. It was beautiful, even under the dust. And it was old. Very old. Clara recognized the style vaguely from antique shops. Late Victorian, perhaps? There was a small, tarnished silver clasp holding it shut. Shadow had stopped sniffing. She sat back on her haunches, staring at the box in Clara's hands. All the frantic energy had drained from her. She looked smaller, older. Her mismatched eyes were fixed on the box with an expression that wasn't curiosity, but recognition. Deep, soul-deep recognition. And sorrow. An ocean of sorrow in those feline eyes. Clara's own heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just a hidden compartment. This was a cache. Deliberately concealed. Carefully placed. Her mother? The man in the photograph? Someone else entirely? Her hands trembled as she brushed thick layers of dust from the lid. She fumbled with the tarnished clasp. It was stiff, resistant. Shadow watched, utterly still, a silent sentinel. With a click that echoed loudly in the tense silence, the clasp gave way. Clara took a shaky breath. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded, dark blue velvet, lay three things. First, a small, oval locket. Gold, or perhaps gold-plated, tarnished almost black. A delicate floral pattern was etched onto its surface, worn smooth in places by time and touch. Second, a folded piece of thick, yellowed paper. Not modern stationery. Something older, more substantial. Third, a single, dried flower. A fragile, brittle thing. Its color faded to a ghostly pale blue. A bluebell. Clara's breath hitched. Clara's favorite spot, May 98. The memory from the journal flashed, vivid and bright. The bluebells. Her mother's smile. Slowly, almost reverently, Clara picked up the locket. It felt cold, heavy with secrets. Her thumb found the tiny catch on its side. She pressed. The locket sprang open with a soft snick. Inside, protected behind cloudy glass, were two tiny photographs, cut into circles to fit. On one side, a young Evelyn. Radiant. Unburdened. Her smile wide and free, just like in the mysterious photograph. On the other side, the man. The same intense eyes, the same confident smile. But here he looked younger. Softer around the edges. His arm wasn't possessively around Evelyn. They were simply facing the camera together, their shoulders touching. A private moment. An intimacy the other photograph lacked. Clara stared, her vision blurring. The man wasn't a stranger. He was part of her mother's heart. A hidden chapter. Shadow made a soft sound. A low, rumbling purr, but it was unlike her sunbeam purr. This was deeper, rougher, threaded with an unmistakable vibration of grief. She leaned forward, pressing her head gently, insistently, against Clara's knee where she knelt. Not demanding attention, but offering comfort? Shared sorrow? Clara lowered the locket, her fingers trembling. She reached for the folded paper. It crackled with age as she carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was strong, masculine, flowing across the page in dark ink that had faded to brown in places. My dearest Evelyn, the orders came today. They say it's for training, but the whispers are of France. I won't lie to you, my love. Fear sits cold in my belly, not for myself, but for you. For the life we've only just begun to dream of in this grand old house. I leave you not just my heart, which is yours entirely, but a small piece of my hope. The locket is my mother's. She wore it the day she met my father. May it watch over you until I can again. The bluebell. I picked it yesterday from our spot by the old oak. Pressed it quick before it faded. When you see it, think of me and know that wherever I am, my soul seeks its way back to yours, like a river to the sea. Keep our secret safe, my darling. Tell no one, not yet. The world is too harsh for fragile things. Guard it as fiercely as I guard the memory of your smile. I've hidden this away, a whisper in the walls of our future home. Find it if the river doesn't find its way back. Find it and know my love endures. Yours, forever and always, Daniel. The words blurred. Clara's tears fell freely now, hot and silent, splashing onto the yellowed paper. Daniel. Her mother's Daniel. Not a fling. A love. A profound, secret love. A soldier. Gone to France. And never returned. The date? She scanned the top of the letter. April 12, 1917. The Great War. He hadn't come back. The pieces crashed together. The hidden photograph. The secrecy. The sorrow that had always seemed to linger just beneath her mother's calm surface. Evelyn hadn't been reserved by nature. She'd been heartbroken, carrying a secret grief for a lifetime, protecting a love the world never knew about. Daniel's secret, his hope, hidden in the walls. A soft weight pressed against her arm. Shadow had climbed partially into her lap, something she'd never done before. She wasn't purring anymore. She was simply... Her small head rested against Clara's chest, near her pounding heart. Her mismatched eyes gazed up, not at Clara's face, but at the open locket still clutched in her hand. At the tiny photograph of Daniel. There was no wildness in her gaze now. Only an immeasurable sadness and a deep, quiet knowing. Clara looked from the cat's ancient eyes to the photograph of the young man, to her mother's face in the locket, so full of joy and hope. The grief she felt wasn't just her own anymore. It was layered. It was her mother's silent burden. It was Daniel's lost future. It was the echo of a love story buried beneath floorboards and decades of silence. She lowered the letter, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She looked down at Shadow, the small gray cat who had clawed through plaster and time to unearth this truth. "You knew," Clara whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Didn't you? You knew he was here." Shadow didn't move. She just pressed her head a fraction harder against Clara's chest. Her eyes, one green, one amber, held a reflection of the locket's tarnished gold and an ocean of shared sorrow that spanned generations. The frantic scratching, the desperate digging, it hadn't been random. It had been a homing instinct, a feline pilgrimage to a place heavy with the scent of a lost human. Daniel's scent? Had Shadow somehow known? Was she drawn by the lingering echo of his presence, sealed away for a century? Or was it something deeper, stranger, a connection Clara couldn't fathom? The storm outside reached a crescendo, wind howling like lost souls. But inside the hallway, kneeling on the cold floorboards with a hidden box and a small, grieving cat in her lap, Clara felt a different kind of tempest. It was the breaking open of her heart to encompass not just her own loss, but the vast, silent tragedy of her mother's hidden life, and the small, persistent creature who had refused to let it stay buried. The tears flowed freely now, not just for her mother, but for Evelyn's stolen joy, for Daniel's lost promise, and for the strange, silent cat who had borne witness to it all. She wrapped one arm around Shadow's thin body, pulling her closer, feeling the small heartbeat against her own. The connection wasn't just about shared grief anymore. It was about unraveling a mystery written in scratches on a wall and sealed with a bluebell. It was about love, loss, and the incredible lengths a heart, human or feline, will go to remember. The climax wasn't a shout. It was a whisper of understanding echoing in the cavity left by the lifted floorboard, as profound and shattering as the storm outside. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of ghosts acknowledged. Full of love finally spoken. Full of the quiet, steady purr that began, deep and resonant, in the small cat curled against her chest. The storm outside eventually wore itself out, leaving behind a world hushed and glittering under a brittle crust of ice. Inside the old Victorian, the silence felt different. It wasn't the crushing emptiness of before, nor the tense anticipation of the hunt. It was a quiet saturated with presence, with ghosts acknowledged, secrets aired, and a profound, shared exhaustion. Clara didn't move for a long time. She sat on the cold hallway floor, the ornate box resting open beside her, Daniel's letter a fragile weight in her lap. Shadow remained curled against her chest, a small, warm anchor. The deep, resonant purr that had started in the cat's chest hadn't stopped. It was a steady vibration against Clara's own heartbeat, a tangible sign of peace? Release? Clara stroked the soft, ragged fur between Shadow's ears, her fingers tracing the familiar notch on the ear. The frantic tension that had thrummed through the small body for weeks was gone, replaced by a heavy, almost languid stillness. It felt like the aftermath of a great exertion, a deep sigh after a long-held breath. The discovery hadn't erased Clara's grief for her mother. Instead, it had expanded it, deepened its color, like ink spreading in water. Grief for Evelyn became intertwined with grief for Evelyn's lost love, for the vibrant young woman trapped in the locket's photograph, for the lifetime of quiet sorrow she'd carried beneath her calm, practical exterior. Clara looked at the faded bluebell in the box, a whisper of spring pressed a century ago, and understood, viscerally, the weight of the memory her mother had preserved, yet never spoken of. "Keep our secret safe, my darling. The world is too harsh for fragile things." Evelyn had guarded Daniel's love and his memory fiercely. To the end. Clara carefully closed the box, the tarnished clasp clicking softly. She placed it gently on the floor beside her, then scooped Shadow more securely into her arms as she stood, her legs stiff and protesting. The cat didn't struggle. She simply adjusted her position, tucking her head under Clara's chin, the purr deepening. Clara carried her into the kitchen, the heart of the house, turning on a single lamp that cast a warm, intimate pool of light on the worn table. She made tea. The familiar ritual, filling the kettle, choosing a cup, her mother's favorite, chipped rim and all. The hiss of steam felt grounding. Shadow watched from the table, curled into a tight loaf, her mismatched eyes half closed, tracking Clara's movements with a new, relaxed attentiveness. The frantic, demanding energy was absent. She was present, simply being. Clara sat, cradling the hot cup, the warmth seeping into her chilled fingers. She looked at Shadow. "Daniel," she murmured, the name feeling strange yet right on her tongue. His name was Daniel. The cat blinked slowly, deliberately. Her purr didn't falter. It wasn't confirmation, exactly. More like acceptance. Acknowledgement. The question hung, unspoken but heavy. "Who are you, Shadow?" How was this small, feral creature connected to a love story buried for a century? Was she drawn by the lingering psychic residue of profound loss? By the faint, ancient scent of Daniel sealed beneath the floorboards? Or was it something more tangible, a bloodline stretching back? Had a gray cat with mismatched eyes curled on Daniel's lap in this very house? Had Shadow, generations later, inherited some deep, cellular memory, an echo of a bond that pulled her relentlessly to that spot in the hallway? Clara knew she'd likely never have a definitive answer. The mystery of Shadow's connection to Daniel, and thus to Evelyn, would remain just that, a beautiful, poignant mystery. And strangely, Clara found she didn't need it solved. The fact of the connection, demonstrated so powerfully, was enough. Life in the old house began to reshape itself around this new understanding. The monumental task of sorting through her mother's belongings continued, but the lens had shifted. Clara no longer saw just objects. She saw layers. The practical Evelyn who kept meticulous gardening journals existed alongside the young woman who'd pressed a bluebell from a secret spot with her love. The reserved mother was also the woman who had fiercely guarded a locket and a letter for a lifetime. Sorting became less about discarding and more about contextualizing. Understanding. She found a small frame for the photograph of Evelyn and Daniel. Not hidden away, but placed openly on her mother's old dresser, beside a picture of Clara as a child. Evelyn and Daniel. Evelyn and Clara's father. Evelyn and Clara. It felt right. Acknowledging the fullness of her mother's heart. Daniel's box, cleaned of dust but its contents undisturbed, found a place on the mantelpiece in the seldom-used parlor. Not a shrine, but a testament. A secret finally honored. Shadow's integration into the daily rhythm deepened, marked by subtle shifts. She still spent hours basking in sunbeams, her purr a contented rumble, but the vigor had returned. She ate with more relish, her thin frame gradually filling out, her storm cloud fur gaining a healthier sheen. The saucer on the back porch step became a formality. She began waiting just inside the kitchen door when Clara prepared meals, watching with polite intensity until a small portion was placed deliberately on a chipped plate on the floor. She no longer vanished instantly if Clara moved nearby while she ate. There was trust now. Earned, fragile but real. She still only vocalized when Clara cried. The soft, questioning meow would materialize from a nearby shadow if tears fell, triggered by a forgotten note in her mother's handwriting, a sudden wave of loneliness, or the sheer overwhelm of the house's needs. But the response was different now. Shadow no longer observed from a distance. She would approach, often winding herself around Clara's ankles, or leaping onto the arm of the chair where Clara sat, pressing her head against a trembling hand. The silent vigil had evolved into tangible comfort. The paw that had once tentatively touched Clara's knee now sought contact readily. She'd curl up beside Clara on the sofa as she pored over bills or old letters, a warm, purring weight against her thigh. One bright, cold morning, Clara was in the conservatory, a glass-walled room currently more icebox than sunroom, its leaking roof temporarily patched with a tarp. She was attempting to salvage some of her mother's frostbitten geraniums, the earthy smell of damp soil and decaying leaves sharp in the air. Frustration mounted as another brittle stem snapped in her fingers. She wasn't crying, just sighing heavily, the endless repairs and decisions feeling like a physical weight. A soft thump made her turn. Shadow had jumped onto the potting bench, scattering a few dried leaves. She walked deliberately along the edge, her tail held high, stopping directly in front of the cracked pane Clara had temporarily sealed. She sat, facing Clara, her mismatched gaze steady. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted a front paw and tapped the glass. Not frantic, like her digging. Insistent. Meaningful. Clara frowned, wiping her muddy hands on her jeans. "What is it, little one? Cold out there?" She peered through the grimy glass. The frosted garden lay dormant under the weak sun. Nothing moved. Shadow tapped the glass again. Then she turned her head and looked pointedly, not outside, but up, at the sagging, tarp-covered section of the conservatory roof. Clara followed her gaze. A slow smile spread across her face, surprising her. "The roof? You're giving me home improvement advice now." Shadow blinked slowly, then turned back, her gaze resting on Clara's face. There was no smugness, just that quiet, unnerving attentiveness. It felt less like instruction and more like partnership. Like Shadow was invested. In the house. In Clara. Later that day, Clara found herself researching local roofing contractors online. Shadow curled in a patch of sunlight nearby, watching the screens glow with half-lidded interest. The decision felt different. Not just a necessary chore, but an act of stewardship. For her mother's house. For Daniel and Evelyn's dream. For herself. And for the small, enigmatic creature who seemed to have appointed herself guardian. The relentless scratching at the hallway baseboard never returned. Sometimes, Clara would find Shadow sitting quietly in that spot, her posture relaxed, almost meditative. She'd sniff the air near the repaired floorboard, her expression thoughtful, but there was no urgency, no distress. It was as if she was visiting a grave, paying respects. The frantic mission was complete, the restless spirit appeased. Now, it was a place of memory, acknowledged and at peace. Clara began to venture beyond the walls of the house. Short walks in the frosty garden, breathing air that burned her lungs but felt clean. Shadow sometimes accompanied her, a silent gray ghost padding a few feet behind, exploring the skeletal remains of her mother's herb garden, sniffing at frost-heaved stones. She never wandered far, always keeping Clara in sight, returning to weave around her legs before heading back towards the warmth of the house. One afternoon, Clara found herself standing by the large, ancient oak tree at the bottom of the garden, the one mentioned in Daniel's letter. Our spot by the old oak. The ground beneath it was hard and frozen, blanketed in dead leaves. In May, she knew it would be carpeted in bluebells. She closed her eyes, imagining her young mother and Daniel here, a century ago, stealing moments of peace before the world tore them apart. The grief was there, a familiar ache, but it was layered now with a sense of continuity. The oak still stood. The bluebells would return. The love, though lost, had endured. A soft rustle made her open her eyes. Shadow was sitting a few feet away, watching her. Not from the garden path, but nestled amongst the roots of the great oak itself. She wasn't looking at Clara, but past her, towards the house. Her posture was utterly still, her mismatched eyes reflecting the pale winter light. There was a dignity in her stillness, a profound sense of belonging to this place, to this moment. Clara walked back towards the house, Shadow falling into step beside her, a small, silent companion on the frosted path. As they reached the back door, Clara paused, looking back at the oak, then down at the cat beside her. "We'll plant more bluebells in the spring, Shadow," she said softly, her breath making a small cloud in the cold air. "Lots of them." Shadow didn't meow. She just looked up at Clara, blinked once, slowly, deliberately, and then nudged her head gently against Clara's ankle before slipping inside, towards the warmth of the kitchen and the waiting sunbeams stretching across the worn linoleum. The choice, Clara realized, standing on the threshold between the frozen garden and the waiting warmth, wasn't just about staying or going. It was about embracing the legacy she'd uncovered, the grief, the love, the enduring spirit of the place, and weaving her own story into its fabric. The crushing loneliness had receded, replaced by a complex tapestry of memory, responsibility, and the quiet, purring companionship of a small gray cat who had led her to the heart of it all. The mystery hadn't ended with the box. It had simply changed form, settling into the bones of the house and the rhythm of their shared days, a quiet hum beneath the surface of ordinary life. The silence now wasn't empty, it was full of the past, peacefully coexisting with the present. And the future, though still uncertain, felt less like an abyss and more like a path they might walk together. Spring arrived not with a fanfare, but with a slow, insistent thaw. The iron grip of winter loosened, replaced by a softer, damp cold that carried the scent of wet earth and waking roots. The skeletal branches of the old oak began to blush with tiny, unfurling buds, and tentative spears of green pushed through the frost-heaved soil in the garden. Clara felt the shift inside the house too. The silence, once heavy with grief and secrets, now held a different quality, expectant, almost hopeful. The weight of Evelyn's unspoken past hadn't vanished, but it had been integrated, woven into the fabric of the house's history, acknowledged beside the memories of Clara's childhood and her father's quiet presence in old tools and photographs. Shadow mirrored the changing season. Her thin frame had filled out, her storm cloud fur now thick and glossy, catching the strengthening sunlight that streamed through the windows. The frantic tension, the haunted restlessness that had driven her to the hallway wall, was gone, replaced by a deep, settled calm. She still maintained her routines, the sunbeam vigil in the parlor, her patient wait by the kitchen door at mealtimes, her silent appearance during Clara's rare moments of tears. But there was a new ease in her movements, a playful flick of her notched ear when a dust mote danced too enticingly, a languorous stretch that seemed to encompass the entire length of a sun-warmed rug. She claimed spaces openly now, the arm of Evelyn's favorite reading chair, a corner of the sofa beside Clara, a patch of floor near the crackling fire in the evenings. The house felt less like a decaying monument and more like a home shared. Clara kept her promise about the bluebells. On a cool, bright morning, the air sharp with the scent of damp soil and new growth, she knelt near the base of the ancient oak. She'd ordered bulbs months ago, proper English bluebells, Hyacinthoides non-scripta, the kind that would create a rippling blue sea beneath the branches come May. Digging small holes in the rich, dark earth, Clara felt a connection spanning decades. She imagined Evelyn, young and vibrant, kneeling here with Daniel, perhaps planting something else, sharing dreams under the dappled light. She imagined her mother, years later, perhaps planting the very bluebell Daniel had pressed, its faded ghost now resting beside his letter in the rosewood box on the mantel. The ache was there, a familiar bittersweetness, but it was softened by purpose, by the act of nurturing something beautiful back into the world. Shadow watched from a respectful distance, perched on a moss-covered stone near the edge of the clearing. Her mismatched eyes, one green as new leaves, one amber as old honey, followed Clara's movements with quiet interest. She didn't approach the digging, content to observe, her tail curled neatly around her paws. As Clara planted the last bulb, patting the earth gently, Shadow suddenly stood. Her posture shifted from relaxed watchfulness to intense focus. Her ears pricked forward, swiveling minutely, not towards Clara, but towards the dense thicket of brambles and wild rhododendron that bordered the oak clearing on the side farthest from the house. It was an area Clara had largely ignored, a tangle left wild even in Evelyn's meticulously tended days. Shadow emitted a soft sound, not a meow, but a low, inquisitive MRRP. She hopped down from her stone and took a few tentative steps towards the thicket, her nose twitching vigorously. She paused, looked back at Clara, then took a few more steps, her gaze fixed on a particular spot where the brambles arched over a cluster of large, mossy rocks. "What is it, little one?" Clara called softly, brushing dirt from her knees. "Found a mouse's palace?" Shadow didn't look back. She crouched low, her body language pure feline concentration, and began to creep slowly, deliberately, towards the base of the largest rock, half hidden by the thorny embrace of the brambles. It was the focused stalk Clara had seen only once before, the day she'd watched her discover the sunbeam. But this wasn't about warmth. This felt different, intentional. Curious, Clara followed, pushing aside the whippy branches carefully, mindful of the thorns. Shadow had vanished into the dense undergrowth at the rock's base. Clara could hear soft rustling, the scrape of small claws on stone. "Shadow? You okay in there?" Clara knelt, peering into the dim, earthy space beneath the overhanging rock and brambles. It smelled of damp moss, decaying leaves, and the sharp, clean scent of cat. She saw a flicker of movement. Shadow was pawing intently at the base of the rock, not frantically like she had at the hallway floorboard, but with methodical persistence. She was digging, her front legs working rhythmically, sending small sprays of loose soil and leaf litter behind her. "Scrabble, scrabble, scrabble." "What on earth?" Clara murmured. Was it a den? A cache of nuts? But Shadow wasn't eating. She was excavating. After a minute, Shadow stopped digging. She backed out slightly, turning her head to look directly at Clara. Her eyes held that unnerving intensity again, but without the previous desperation. It was more expectant. She nudged her nose towards the small depression she'd made, then looked back at Clara, blinking slowly. The message was clear. Hesitantly, Clara reached into the cool, earthy space Shadow had vacated. Her fingers brushed damp soil, small stones, and the fibrous tangle of roots. Then her fingertips encountered something smooth, not a stone. Cool, hard, and slightly curved. She carefully worked it loose from the clinging earth. Pulling her hand back into the dappled sunlight, Clara gasped softly. Resting on her palm, caked in mud but unmistakable, was a small, tarnished silver pocket watch. It was old, the glass face cracked but intact, the intricate scrollwork on the casing worn almost smooth in places. Attached to it by a short, sturdy chain was a small, rectangular fob, a simple piece of metal, also tarnished. Clara's heart hammered. She knew instantly. This wasn't hers. It wasn't her father's practical style. This belonged to another time. To him. With trembling fingers, she rubbed at the mud on the metal fob. Letters emerged, etched deep and still clear despite the tarnish and grime. DWH. Daniel William Hartley. The signature on the letter. The name whispered in the hidden box. Clara sank back onto her heels, the cool earth seeping through her jeans, the pocket watch a heavy, impossible weight in her hand. Daniel's watch. Lost here? Hidden? Why buried beneath this rock? Away from the house? Away from their spot? Shadow emerged fully from the thicket. She didn't go to the watch. Instead, she walked calmly over to Clara and sat down beside her, leaning her small body gently against Clara's leg. She began to purr, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through Clara's thigh. It wasn't the purr of contentment after a sunbeam. It was the purr she'd emitted when Clara opened the rosewood box, a purr threaded with sorrow, with memory, and now, with completion. Clara looked from the watch in her muddy hand to the cat beside her, purring against her leg. The pieces clicked into place with a quiet, devastating certainty. Shadow's connection wasn't just to the house, or to the scent sealed beneath the floorboards. It was to this place. To the garden. To the oak. To the secret spot where Daniel and Evelyn met. She hadn't been drawn to the hallway because that's where Daniel's physical memento was hidden. She'd been drawn there because it was the heart of the structure, the point where the energy of the house, saturated with decades of Evelyn's silent grief and Daniel's lost presence, was most concentrated. But her true home, her true anchor, was out here. Among the roots and the stones and the emerging bluebells. Where Daniel had walked. Where he had perhaps lost his watch. Had Shadow unearthed it before? Had she known it was here all along, this tangible piece of him? Was this why she'd been so restless near the oak? Not just because of Clara's promise to plant, but because this was here? This final piece of the man whose love had shaped the hidden sorrow in Evelyn's eyes. The sorrow Shadow had somehow always sensed? The cat's knowledge felt ancient, instinctive, a thread woven through generations. Perhaps a gray cat had curled on Daniel's lap. Perhaps Shadow carried that echo in her bones, in her mismatched eyes. She hadn't just helped Clara unearth a secret, she had guarded Daniel's final, lost possession, waiting for the right moment, the right person, to reveal it. Clara carefully wiped more mud from the watch casing with her thumb. She pressed the small stem. With a faint, gritty click, the lid sprang open. Inside, the delicate face was still, the hands frozen at 4:10. Time stopped. Just like Daniel's life. Just like Evelyn's joy. But beneath the cracked glass, tucked carefully behind the hands, was a tiny, pressed flower. Not a bluebell this time. A single, perfect violet. Faded almost to gray, but undeniably there. A smaller, more intimate token. A love note whispered in petals, carried next to his heart. The tears that came were quiet. Not the wrenching sobs of raw grief, but the slow, tender spill of profound understanding and aching sweetness. She looked down at Shadow, who leaned more heavily against her, the purr deepening, resonating in the spring air. The cat's mismatched eyes gazed up at her, holding the reflection of the oak, the sky, and the tarnished silver watch. There was no demand in her gaze now. Only peace. The offering was complete. Clara carefully closed the watch, the violet safely hidden once more. She cradled it in her palm, feeling the cool metal, the weight of stopped time, the whisper of a love that had endured beyond death and secrecy. Shadow had given her more than just a hidden box or a lost watch. She had given Clara the tangible proof of Daniel's physical presence in this garden, on this earth. He hadn't just been a face in a photograph or a signature on a letter. He had walked here. He had knelt beneath this oak. He had held Evelyn here. He had lost his watch here. He had lived here, however briefly. Shadow, the small, silent guardian of this place, had kept vigil over this final fragment of him, waiting for Evelyn and finding Clara instead. Later, back in the quiet warmth of the parlor, Clara placed Daniel's pocket watch beside the rosewood box on the mantelpiece. The tarnished silver caught the afternoon light, a humble counterpoint to the box's ornate beauty. She didn't open it again. The violet inside felt too private, too sacred. It belonged to Daniel and Evelyn. Its secret was safe. Shadow jumped onto the arm of Evelyn's reading chair, curling into a tight loaf, her eyes closing to contented slits, her purr a soft rumble in the peaceful room. She watched Clara, not the objects on the mantel. Her work was done. Clara sat on the sofa, looking at the watch, the box, and the cat. The impact of this small, feral creature became dazzlingly clear. Shadow hadn't just offered comfort in grief. She hadn't just unearthed a family secret. She had restored a lost love story to its physical place. She had bridged the chasm between Clara and the ghost of her mother's deepest heart. She had transformed a house of sorrow and secrets into a place layered with meaning, with continuity, with a love that had literally been buried but refused to die. Shadow had given Clara not just companionship, but context. Not just solace, but a legacy. She had led her to understand that love, even lost, endures not just in memory, but in the very soil, in the roots of ancient trees, guarded by small, fierce hearts who remember. As the first true warmth of spring seeped through the windows, Clara whispered into the quiet room, her gaze resting on the small, sleeping cat. "You weren't just a shadow, were you? You were the keeper of the light." The words weren't for anyone but herself and the purring guardian on the chair. They held the weight of revelation, the quiet awe of a gift finally understood, and the profound, unshakable bond forged in the unlikeliest of ways, in the heart of shared silence and unearthed time. The watch on the mantel ticked no more, but in the stillness, Clara felt the steady, living pulse of a story that was finally whole. Years have a way of softening edges, of weaving new threads into old tapestries. The Grand Victorian, once a mausoleum of dust and echoing grief, now breathes with a different life. The ivy still clings, perhaps a little thicker, but the windows gleam. The leaky conservatory roof, finally repaired, houses a jungle of Evelyn's geraniums, now thriving under Clara's care, their scent mingling with the aroma of fresh paint and wood polish. Beneath the ancient oak, the bluebells Clara planted have multiplied, a breathtaking sea of violet blue each May, a living tribute to a love story whispered in pressed flowers and lost time. Clara sits on a weathered wooden bench beneath the oak's burgeoning canopy, a mug of steaming tea warming her hands. Spring is in full, riotous bloom. The air hums with bees, thick with the scent of blossoms and damp earth. Beside her, curled in a pool of dappled sunlight, is Shadow. No longer thin, no longer ragged, but a creature of substance and quiet dignity. Her storm cloud fur is thick and lustrous, catching the light, the notch on her ear a badge of a life lived fiercely. Her mismatched eyes, one the green of new oak leaves, one the deep amber of aged honey, are half closed in contentment, but they miss nothing. The deep, resonant purr vibrating through her small frame is the soundtrack of this peaceful moment, a steady counterpoint to the birdsong. She doesn't startle when a butterfly flits past, nor when a squirrel chatters indignantly from a higher branch. The frantic tension, the haunted restlessness, is a memory. Shadow inhabits this garden, this house, this life, with a profound sense of belonging, of home. She is no longer just a silent witness. She is part of the story's fabric. Clara sips her tea, her gaze drifting over the sea of bluebells. She thinks of the rosewood box on the parlor mantel, beside Daniel's tarnished pocket watch, frozen at 4:10. She thinks of the tiny violet hidden beneath its cracked glass, a secret within a secret, a love note carried next to a soldier's heart. She thinks of her mother, Evelyn, young and radiant in the locket, then older, her joy tempered but her love for Daniel a quiet flame she kept alive in the hidden chambers of her heart. The discovery hadn't erased the grief. Time hadn't magically healed the loss of her mother. Instead, understanding had transformed it. The grief was no longer a crushing, monolithic weight, but a complex landscape, valleys of sadness for moments never shared, peaks of gratitude for the woman Evelyn was, and rolling hills of bittersweet awe for the hidden depth of her love, her resilience, her silent strength. Clara's own sorrow was now interwoven with Evelyn's, with Daniel's, creating a richer, more resonant emotional tapestry. Shadow had been the weaver, the small, feral cat who had appeared like a phantom in the echoing silence of loss, who had spoken only when Clara's own voice broke, who had clawed through plaster and time, not for food or shelter, but for truth, for memory, for love. Clara looks down at the cat beside her. Shadow opens her eyes fully, meeting Clara's gaze. There's no demand there, no restless energy. Just a deep, quiet knowing. An understanding that spans species, woven through shared silence, unearthed secrets, and the profound comfort of simply being present in another's life. "You knew, didn't you?" Clara murmurs, her voice soft, almost lost in the rustle of leaves. "From the very beginning. You knew this house wasn't just walls and dust. You knew it held hearts. Broken ones. Waiting ones." She reaches out, her fingers gently stroking the fur between Shadow's ears, tracing the familiar notch. "You weren't just drawn to my tears, Shadow. You were drawn to hers. To the sorrow that soaked these walls for decades. You felt it, like a vibration in the air. And you wouldn't let it stay buried." Shadow leans into the touch, her purr deepening. It's a sound that speaks of peace, of a long journey completed. She closes her eyes again, basking in the sun and the gentle touch. The message of this story isn't shouted. It's whispered in the rustle of bluebells, in the steady tick of the repaired carriage clock inside, in the deep purr resonating from a small, gray chest. It's about the incredible, often unseen, ways love endures. How it can be buried beneath floorboards, pressed between pages, hidden in the depths of a grieving heart, or carried in the ancient instincts of a small, silent creature. It's about the courage it takes to face hidden truths, not because it erases the pain, but because it allows the pain to mean something. To connect us across time, across loss, across even the barrier between species. It's about the unexpected families we find. Not always in blood, but in shared silence. In a paw resting on a knee during a storm of tears. In mismatched eyes holding yours with unwavering understanding. In a small, fierce heart refusing to let love be forgotten. Shadow taught Clara that grief isn't the absence of love. It's love's echo in an empty room. And that echo, if we listen, if we have the courage to follow the small, insistent scratches on the walls of our own hearts, can lead us back to wholeness. To a place where the past isn't a burden, but a foundation. Where loss isn't an ending, but a transformation. The bluebells sway gently in a warm breeze. Shadow's purr is a steady anchor. Clara takes a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of spring, of earth, of renewal. She thinks of Daniel's watch, forever stopped, and of the living world around her, constantly moving forward. Time takes, but love persists. It's in the roots of the oak, in the scent of geraniums, in the feel of warm fur under her hand, in the quiet understanding that now exists between her and the ghost of her mother's deepest secret. Shadow stretches, a long, luxurious movement that arches her back, extends her claws briefly, and ends with a contented sigh. She stands, shakes herself lightly, and then, with a grace that belies her years, hops down from the bench. She doesn't head back towards the house immediately. Instead, she walks a few paces into the sea of bluebells. She pauses, turning her head to look back at Clara one more time. Her mismatched eyes hold the sunlight, the blue of the flowers, the deep green of the oak leaves. There's a finality in that look, a soft, profound farewell that needs no sound. A slow blink, deliberate, meaningful. Then she turns and pads silently, purposefully, deeper into the bluebells. She doesn't vanish. She moves with a quiet dignity, a creature perfectly at home in this world she helped restore, until she's just a dark smudge against the vibrant blue, then a shadow merging with the dappled shade beneath the ancient oak's farthest branches. Gone from sight. But her presence, the indelible mark she left on Clara's life, on the house, on the very understanding of love and loss, remains. A warm weight against the heart, a silent purr in the quiet moments. A keeper of light, indeed. Clara sits on the bench, the warmth of the sun on her face, the scent of bluebells thick in the air, the echo of a deep purr still vibrating in her memory. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of life. Full of memory. Full of love that refused to stay hidden. She closes her eyes, not to shut out the world, but to feel it all. The past, the present, the enduring, quiet strength found in the most unexpected companionship. The story of the silent cat and the grieving woman isn't just a memory, it's the ground she walks on, the air she breathes. It's the reason the bluebells bloom so fiercely. It's the quiet understanding that even in the deepest loss, love finds a way to be heard, if we have the heart to listen for the softest meow in the echoing silence. The garden is quiet now, save for the bees and the wind in the old oak's leaves. But the story lingers. This journey, with Shadow, with my mother's secret heart, it changed everything. It taught me that love doesn't die with the people we lose. It lives on, in the places they cherished, in the objects they held dear, and sometimes, in the quiet, watchful eyes of a creature who remembers what we've forgotten. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a lost love, a quiet companion, or the hidden stories waiting in the walls of your own life, then maybe you understand the echo Shadow left behind. Her story, and Daniel and Evelyn's, deserves to be shared, to remind us all that even in the darkest silence, hope persists. Connection finds a way. Share yours in the comments below. Tell me about the quiet guardian, the unearthed secret, the love that refused to stay buried. Let's keep these stories alive. And if you want to journey into more stories like this, stories that find the extraordinary in the ordinary, the profound in the quiet moments, stories of unexpected bonds and the enduring power of love, then tap subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because every day, there's a new story waiting to be told, a new connection waiting to be found, often in the places and hearts we least expect. Thank you for sharing this journey with Shadow and me. Your presence, your listening hearts, mean the world. Until the next story,